Hello, welcome to chapter 23 of To Kill a Mockingbird. Let's look at what's happening in this chapter so far. This chapter is right after the trial, and we start with Stephanie Crawford. Right, the end of the chapter was her and Mr. Avery running up to tell the kids there was something dangerous to get in your yard, and we find out what's happening. And Stephanie Crawford is out gossiping about everything, talking about the threat, talking about the spitting. She wasn't there, but she talks like she was. Okay, so she's just one of those people who has to have her nose in everything and like spreading it around. The only thing Atticus would say about this whole situation when the kids asked was, "I wish Bob Ewell wouldn't chew tobacco," which makes the situation so much worse. Anyway, the kids are worried, right? They are so worried they want Atticus to get a gun. And they talk about getting guns. And they know Atticus is a good shot. So they know if Atticus gets a gun, he will be able to protect himself. They're worried about him. But they don't have any guns. And the kids even start thinking about, well, maybe we can borrow a gun. No one will loan us a gun. Let's talk to Atticus about borrowing a gun. And he just says, that's nonsense. Atticus is not going to get a gun for protection. Atticus is not going to fight back. So their idea of their father protecting himself is not going to happen. They're afraid that Atticus is going to be killed. If that happens, then Aunt Alexandria will raise them. And we know that Aunt Alexandria is raising her grandson, right? Cousin Francis. And it's interesting. It's almost, they're worried that their father might die, and as a result, Aunt Alexandria will raise them, and as a result, the first thing she'd do would be fire Cal. And that's a big worry for them. Calpurnia is a big part of their family. Scout's trying to change Atticus's mind, and what does she do? She throws a fit. Now, this is something that that Scout doesn't do a lot of, but here she did, and that did not work either. And in a weird situation, Atticus defends Bob Ewell. Right? Imagine this. Here's a guy who spits on you, right? And you make excuses for him, right? Atticus says that Bob Ewell meant the threat when he said it, right? Because he was that mad, which means that he's not saying it now, so he doesn't mean it now. And we've all been that mad before, right? We might have said something we really don't mean, but at the time we felt it, right? It's like, I'll beat you up. And at that time, if they were, 2 feet closer, you would have beat him up. But now you think, I would never do that to this person. That's what anger. And we aren't who we normally are. We're somebody else. So Atticus sees that. He understands people. And he tells Jem to put himself in Bob Ewell's shoes. Right? Atticus destroyed Bob Ewell's credibility. And credibility is all he has, which he doesn't really have any. And Atticus destroyed it. So he has to get back. He has to have a comeback. And Atticus gets spit on. He gets threatened. If Bob Ewell wasn't able to take it out on Atticus, he had to take it out on somebody. And Atticus knows that he would go home and take it out on Mayella, because it's her fault too. So he would beat her up. And Atticus said if it would save Mayella a beating, he's okay with getting spit on and threatened. He's looking out for somebody else. The way he said it, the man had to make some kind of comeback. His kind always does. So it's worth stopping to think for a minute. What is his kind? And then we get into Tom Robinson. We find out that Tom has a good chance of going free, or they're going to overturn the trial or give him a new trial, which is a good outcome. It would have been nicer had it happened in Macomb, but no one expected that except the kids. But if he doesn't get the appeal, and if he doesn't get a new trial, then he'll be killed, because that's the punishment for a rape in Alabama. And Atticus tells the kids again, it is not time to worry yet. This has been a running comment through the whole book, and it's been used to apply to different things. And here we're worrying about Tom Robinson, and it's not time to worry for him yet. So Atticus still has hope for him. And Jem argues the punishment. He shouldn't be killed. He didn't do it, so he shouldn't be killed. And we get into a nice little debate about circumstantial evidence, right? Circumstantial evidence is just hearsay. It's like, oh, well, this could have happened, but there's no real witnesses to back up anything. It's just what the EWELL said versus what Tom Robinson said, and there's no real proof. There was no doctor called for DNA evidence, although they did not. Yeah, it's tricky. You know someone did something, but where's the proof? Well, here, somebody did not do something, but where's the proof? Which goes against you're innocent until you're proven guilty, right? Jem doesn't like it. Jem blames the jury for this. So, jury should be done away with, according to Jem, because the jury messed this up bad. Atticus says you can't get away from juries. But he did agree that judges should provide the sentence in a capital case, not the jury. And the jury in the Tom Robinson case said he should get the chair, right? He should be executed for his crime. It wouldn't be right for the jury to say he's guilty, but let's not give him a sentence. So they called him guilty, gave him the maximum sentence, death. And Atticus thinks that is wrong, thinks the judge should provide the sentence in a capital case. But in Alabama, you can't do that. You need to change the law. Jem says, well, change it, because Atticus is a legislature. Atticus says you can't, and it'll take a long, slow process, and if it did happen, it might not happen in your lifetime. Jem again is like, there should not be juries at all. Tom was innocent. And Atticus concedes that, Jem, if you were on that jury and the other kids were on that jury, Tom would be free. And we get this idea that the kids don't understand the way of the world. And then we talk about trash, right? That kind of people always has a comeback. They always will. And Atticus says whenever a white man does that to a black man, we're talking about the EWELLs here, no matter who he is, how rich he is, or how fine the family he comes from, that white man is trash. If you're taking advantage of someone because that person is uneducated, because that person has a problem, you're trash. You cannot take advantage of others. Atticus said, there is nothing more sickening to me than a low-grade white man who will take advantage of a Negro's ignorance. And that's exactly what Bob Ewell and Mayella Ewell did. And then Atticus talks about society, that the whites in society have been doing this for years and years, and that one day we are going to pay for it, meaning there might be a revolt. There might be something in which African Americans make the whites pay for what they've done through the years. And it seems like we still have the bill to pay for that. And we talk more about juries, especially the jury that convicted Tom Robinson. Jem wants to know why the town folks aren't on the jury. Like Miss Maudie, she wouldn't have done this. People in town, it's only like the old Sarum people that live in the woods. And it's weird how people show up in the juries. The lawyers work together, and we did not see this in the book, but the lawyers work together to pick the jury for this. And Atticus picked one of those people from Old Sarum that was there that night, that wanted to kill Tom Robinson and threatened Atticus when Jem and Scout were there. Scout gets upset that ladies cannot be on the jury. And here we get into some really interesting ideas about women's rights. Now, women's in juries was not allowed until 1957. And that's when federal juries would allow a woman to be on a jury, or a federal trial, excuse me. In 1973, all 50 states in the Union finally allowed women to be on state trials. So this is kind of recent. There are people in your household who were probably alive in 1973 that remembered when this kind of stuff was happening. Wow. We like to think we live in today, 2020, but we are still going through the ramifications, and people are still upset about things that happened in the previous generation. And we found that a jury makes a person decide on something, and sometimes that whatever it is he or she decides on is unpleasant. And so again, Atticus is kind of defending the case, right? Facing this racial discrimination is unpleasant. And if you're on a jury, it is an unpleasant thing. You have to decide someone's fate. I've been on juries. It's not a fun thing to do. So now we get into Tom's jury. Jem thinks they decided Tom's fate really quick. They were in there for hours, and it wasn't quick. Usually when you have a racial issue like this in an all-white jury, it's over in a second. But this took hours. There was someone on the jury that wanted to acquit Tom. It's like, no, not guilty, go home, go free. And it's interesting that that person was a holdout, and it was going to be a hung jury, but he finally gave in to everybody else. And who did that was one of the old Sarum bunch. One of the people, Robinson, and kill him and Atticus at the courthouse when scouts stepped in. And there's some speculation as to who it was. Was it Walter Cunningham's dad? No, but he says that that group, right, that Scout talked to Mr. Cunningham, they left the jail with some respect. Once you get their respect, they're with you for the long haul. And Atticus was counting on that when he selected this person to be on the jury. He just had a hunch. And he and Jem argued over this, right? Jem's like, well, why would you put him on there? And Atticus said there's no difference between someone who's immediately going to convict Tom and someone who might hold back. Jem still thinks they decided the fate too quickly, and this would have taken just a few hours. And I have repeated the slide. Now we get into Aunt Alexandria. She's sitting there the whole time that the kids are talking to Atticus. And Atticus goes to leave because he's done. He's tired. He just wants to go read. And we have that people are generally good, but they're not our kind of people. And she's talking about the Sarum people out in the woods. And she says you can dress them up, you can clean them up, you can shine them up, but they won't be something they're not. And Alexandria believes that a certain type of person is a certain type of person, and that's all it's going to be. She does not approve of letting those, specifically, Scout wants to invite Walter Cunningham over because of what they've done, right? Sticking up for Tom Robinson, and Aunt Albert, nothing. She calls Scout's friends trash. Scout says Scout is a problem to Atticus, which sends Scout into a tizzy. She goes off into her room crying. Jem tries to console her, right? Gives her a Tootsie Roll, nice piece of candy. We have some brother-sister bonding. He's like, I'll show you something. It's Jem trying to console her, right? And Jem's starting puberty, and he takes off his shirt, shows off a chest hair, shows under his arm. He's getting older. And he asks Scout to take up sewing or something. Act like a girl, right? Stop antagonizing Aunt Alexandria. And then we get into there's 4 kinds of people. Jem's figured out there's only 4. There's ordinary folks like them and their neighbors, Miss Maudie and stuff. Says there are people like the Cunninghams out in the woods. There are people like the EWELLs, trash, and there are blacks. Jem is categorizing people, and in this category, blacks are still separate. Now, we wouldn't really think of Jem as blacks are a certain type of people. It's so inbred into the community that even the innocent children kind of see this. And Scout sums it up the best. She says, no, there's only one kind of folks, and that's just folks. People are people. And then we get the ending of the chapter. We talk about Boo Radley, and Jem says he thought like Scout. People were people, but Jem's getting older, right? If they're just one type of folk, why don't they get along? And Jem is getting jaded with things, okay? He's realizing now that there's a lot of trouble in the world, and it is proving what Dolphus Draymond said. You'll cry now, but later when you're adult, you'll just accept it. Why do we accept it as adults? It's a good question. And Jem said as he's getting older, he realizes why Boo Radley stays inside. And we come back to Boo Radley again in this book. And maybe he stays inside because he wants to, because the outside world is so messed up. So that's what this chapter is about. It's about the end of the trial, and they're trying to determine why and how these things happened. Have a great day.